Last time on this channel, we talked about Al Pacino's prop overdose, how Robert De Niro influenced his good friend to take on the role of Tony Montana, and other behind-the-scenes facts about Scarface. Let's continue where we left off, then quickly move on to who sat on the director's chair, how Scarface is as much Miami as it is LA, and of course, the other half of a kill count and many more. We've got a lot to unpack, so back to the 80s we go. It's 1980s Hollywood, and show business was not what it is today. Michelle Pfeiffer was a budding actress, so was Cuban actor Steven Bauer. He was one of the few Latino actors at the time. Yes, Scarface had a handful of unknown actors, but it became the foundation for impressive film careers. One was that of New Yorker Miriam Colon. It turns out, Colon, who played Mama Montana, was only 4 years older than Pacino. Respect and recognition go a long way. In 2014, Colon received the National Medal of Arts, awarded by then-President Barack Obama for her trailblazing work in the theater arts. In Hollywood, one well-respected name is Steven Spielberg. Hollywood has always been its own little club made up of creative minds and artistic talent. Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg are some of the most recognizable names that came out of film school in the 70s and dominated the Hollywood scene from day one. For years, De Palma and Spielberg had wanted to work together. That day finally came when De Palma invited the fellow director to the set of Scarface. They were filming the final scene, the Mansion Massacre. Can you pinpoint which was Spielberg's scene? It's the low-angle shot from when the actors first breached the house. Spielberg is not the only director behind the scenes on the set of Scarface. One of them got away. Or rather, he was dropped from the project. Director Sidney Lumet, best known for 12 Angry Men, brought up the idea of a Cuban immigrant in 1980s Miami. He was inspired by the growing problem of cocaine smuggling coming out of South America. Lumet also wanted to angle the story as a political attack on the U.S. government, which did not sit well with Bregman. Whether Lumet was dropped or not depends on who you ask. According to Oliver Stone, Lumet hated the script, which was ironic because it was Lumet's involvement with the project that enticed Stone to jump on board. Stone thought it a brilliant idea to bring the 1932 setting into contemporary Miami, with Reagan's war on drugs as the reason behind a new kind of criminal, the way Prohibition did with the Mafia. Fortunately, Stone's script was well liked by both Pacino and Bregman. The result of Stone's work was a massive 3-hour script. It could be argued that the authenticity would have fallen short had he not struggled with cocaine addiction himself. Yes, cocaine was all kinds of bad, prop or not. The fledgling writer drew from his experiences with the substance. Stone also scoured the drug scene, interviewing law enforcement and criminals involved with drug trafficking in Florida and the Caribbean. His method soon proved to be challenging to stave off an ever-growing coke addiction while also immersed in that environment. Stone decided to fly to Paris, a world far removed from the one which was numbing his brain, a world few people understood at the time. There, he not only finished the script, but managed to drop the habit as well, realizing that snorting cocaine didn't help him become a better writer at all. In fact, he felt it dumbed him down. Once he kicked the habit, Stone was back in top form. He captured the mood and the times perfectly. Tony Montana was the epitome of male machismo. He is heard using the Spanish slur maricón instead of the English word that rhymes with maggot, spraying it liberally all throughout the film, like the bullets in the movie's final gun battle. Stone also wrote the famous line, "Say hello to my little friend." It is such a brilliant line, delivered so masterfully that many don't realize it wasn't improvised. No doubt written while he was in Paris, fully sober. The Spanish slur, along with the general crude language used throughout the film, wasn't the only problem the filmmakers had with the ratings board. De Palma's original version earned an X rating, which is now known as the dreaded NC-17 rating. The main issue was with the extremely graphic violence. A movie that was X-rated would have limited theater showings and limited ads in the papers. This kills ticket sales. The producer, Bregman, arranged for a hearing wherein he had real-life narcotics officers testify to the realisms of the savage scenes. The scene with the chainsaw, in fact, was based on research by Stone, who, while still in the US, had immersed himself in the drug world. After recutting the film a couple more times, it finally was rated R. De Palma then realized that there was hardly any difference between that third version that passed the board and his original version. So the director released the original version, in spite of its X rating, since additionally, the studio executives couldn't tell the difference either. When it comes to kill count, De Palma wins over, say, Martin Scorsese. That's a wild guess, not a fact. When it comes to F-bombs in the movie, however, De Palma must bow down to the De Niro and Pesci-flanked Scorsese, with a meager 227 F-word count for Scarface, based on what the professed gatekeeper of all things PSV, which stands for profanity, sex, and violence, the Family Media Guide has found Scarface had the most F-words in a movie ever back in 1983. That was true, of course, until Scorsese released Goodfellas, Casino, and finally The Wolf of Wall Street, which holds the #1 spot among box office hits. And among movies we've never heard of? Seriously? Who gives a fuck? I certainly don't. Which counts for nothing. But when established movie critics don't care about a moviegoer's love, there's cause to dig deeper. It turns out, back when it was first released, critics panned Scarface. I know. It's almost unbelievable. They just couldn't get it. Not all critics at the time were too far removed or too dull to see the truth in Scarface, or to appreciate its realism, but most were. Words thrown around at the time were things like morally bankrupt and B-movie. To this day, you will still find people claiming that it was a terrible movie. Unsophisticated, they said. And will you please pass the Grey Poupon while you're at it? Scorsese knew this would happen, not so much because of the violence or crude language, but because it was about Hollywood, and Hollywood doesn't like looking at itself, apparently. One celebrity lauded the film from the very beginning, Hollywood star Eddie Murphy. Murphy and countless audiences everywhere didn't care what critics said, and the movie that could have been another flop for actress Michelle Pfeiffer went on to be a profitable success. Well, so much for the critics, because in 2008, Scarface was named one of the 10 greatest gangster movies of all time by the prestigious American Film Institute. The rap community loves it too. Sean Combs has said he has watched the movie over 60 times. His reasons are not what you might think. He says he picks up interesting lessons from the De Palma classic. What does the Scarface star say about rappers loving his film? He's quite happy. In fact, Pacino is grateful to them for letting the movie live on. There's been talk about a possible Scarface remake for years now. Before I let that blow my mind, I looked into any update on the subject. If you will recall from part 1 of this video, the 1983 version set in Miami was itself a remake of the original black and white version set in Chicago. The 80s version may have been set in Miami, famous in the 80s for Gloria Estefan and the Synth, and rock-heavy Miami Vice TV series, but the movie was actually shot mostly on location in LA, which is exactly where most of its rap fan base is from. And yes, I know rap music is everywhere, but you're missing the point. Miami didn't want it. Protests were held in the city. Residents didn't want Scarface filmed there. The film would have been shot in Miami had their tourism board agreed to having their city known as the hub for drugs and violence. Moreover, Miami's Cuban community was outraged. Despite the lavish lifestyle of Tony Montana, he was still a deranged drug lord. Now, what community would want to be associated with that? Nevertheless, Scarface managed to shoot in the beautiful city for 2 weeks. Then it covered locations in New York, Santa Barbara, and of course LA. Do I even have to ask if LA will want Scarface filmed there again? In all likelihood, Italian director Luca Guadagnino will take the reins on the real LA version, with the Coen brothers in charge of the script. I don't know enough about director Luca to form an opinion, but if the likes of serious actors Tilda Swinton, Chloe Grace Moretz, and Timothée Chalamet have worked well with him, he's got my vote. So, even though De Palma had turned down the inclusion of rap music in the re-release of his movie back in 2003, there is still hope for rap in the future Scarface remake. Has development stalled because of lukewarm interest from fans? I don't know. Maybe you can figure it out. But if they were to do a second remake, who should be in it? And how would you want it to be?